Hi, this is the Philosophical Angle program, and I am your host, Chris Angle. Along with me is my co-host and colleague, Rick Samuelson. Rick graduated from Yale and is a venture capitalist out on the West Coast. Good to see you, Rick.
And you.
This week, the purpose of the purpose of the Philosophical Angle is always to discuss what's happening in current media and define and analyze those concepts. And this week the concept is the fact that the left lies and is unethical in its behavior. And the application is that the left is traducing President Trump and his administration every day in the media. And conservatives are no doubt getting tired of every day seeing in the media a new story that further slanders President Trump and his administration. And it is relentless and fueled by all sorts of anonymous reports. And the conservative talk show commentators have pointed out that the reports are fueling the media and the talk shows without any substantial basis in fact. And in listening to the conservative talk show hosts, they point out that the purpose of all this is to produce a narrative that undermines the credibility of the president. And further, as exemplified by the daily innuendos and anonymous reports, it says it stays on the front page every day, and other serious matters such as the actual assassination attempt of Republicans playing a baseball game by a leftist Trump hater, and this barely gets any attention at all. Imagine if the shooter had been shooting at the Democrats. Whew, that story would never get off the front page. And rightly so, as well it should. It's a terrible thing. And watching all this, your normal run-of-the-mill conservative or Republican would look at this and become exasperated. I know I am every day with this. Well, the left-wing political groups produce the fake news, and the media runs with it, except, of course, for the reputable conservative outlets and commentators, and naturally they need to talk about it, but they're not generating any of the fake news as does the left-wing political groups and the media that follow it. So you got to ask yourself, what gives? Obviously, we have never seen in our political history anything like this before. And this is, as commentators such as Rush Limbaugh have pointed this out. Many people might say, well, the conservatives and Republicans do the same thing. But no, they don't. All these actions of traducing the Trump administration are totally unethical. So how can the left be so amoral? Let's examine this, and I'm going to make a statement, a general statement now, that the left is by its nature totally unethical. Well, the first thing that probably strikes you is that I've said and declared that the right is more ethical than the left, and that the left is unethical in general. And how could I say such a thing? Well, to explain, the left is ethical only to others who are of the left, but to those outside of the left, such as Republicans and conservatives and other types of political groups, the leftists may not be ethical as per their choice. In other words, they may deem it expedient and not be ethical, but they will feel that they are totally justified, even if they are unethical. And the reason, I'm going to explain, the left considers others that are not of the left to be inherently bad people, if not evil, as Bill Clinton once said to Dick Morris. Therefore, they calculate that if somebody is of an inherently bad nature and in essence is a bad person, they are and feel totally unbounded by any ethical considerations regarding the conservative or the Republican or whoever's in their sights, in their target. That is, the Democrat utopian leftists. It's kind of a nice term, Democrat utopian leftists. We'll call them the DULs. Or maybe I should put it the other way. Leftist, utopian Democrat. That would sound a little bit better. We'll call them LUDs. Okay, the LUDs will think that it is totally within his morality to behave in any way that is expedient to his leftist utopian ends. The utopian leftist will consider that the end justifies the means when dealing with people that have a bad nature, which are all those outside of the utopian left, like me. And with those inside the utopian circle, group, he is ethical, but outside the utopian left, outside the LUDs, they employ the amorality of the ends justifies the means. And you can see this throughout history. Look at Stalin and his behavior to his own Russian people and to the Ukrainian people, probably murdering up to 50 million people. The total leftist, Pol Pot, murdered in excess of 50% of his population. Look at Mao. And when the river Yangtze ran red with the blood of the Chinese people. And he executed them for the good of his utopian dream that he had. All these Lud politicians consider their ideology supreme, and at the end of bringing in this ideology necessitated the use of whatever means available to effectuate such a result. And the reason for all this is that the leftist utopian considers that the end justifies the means, and that they can consider this possible because they know that other people's nature is essentially bad. This morality, or maybe I should say non-morality, of the ends justifies the means, it's possible only if one has no ethics at all. The ends justifies the means is not an ethical system. And I know you're probably all out there wondering, well, what is the essence of ethics? And so we'll give that to you here. Ethics is the appropriate dispensation of respect. Evolution has allowed for the appearance of respect within the human species in order to allow humans to cooperate with each other, as we cannot live alone in nature. We have to live in groups. And we offer respect to another because we consider that other person important. And respect is a kind of communication, and it indicates to others that we consider them important in our need to cooperate with them. We require our society to be able to cooperate with each other in order to produce goods and services, which is the physical culture of our society. And we produce goods and services in order to survive and bring ourselves up away from misery, which is the essence of good. Therefore, if you did not give another person his due respect, you are outside the realm of ethicality. If we apply this definition to what's going on in the current media, we can see that the utopian left think tanks, the media, the utopian left politicians are not giving the appropriate amount of respect to the President of the United States. All their actions are predicated on achieving a certain result, which is to bring down the Trump administration without employing an ounce of fact or evidence of wrongdoing, or at the very least to make it an ineffectual president and make it an ineffectual administration. And why is there this dichotomy of ethicality, and how and why did this come about? The utopian Democrat socialist evolved in a way due to three factors. The first factor is that which we have already discussed. That is, the leftist feels that the other person is by nature a bad person. But secondly, the LUDs, the LUDs, have for the ultimate good of society to be social and economic justice. That is total egalitarian justice. And this objective of societal justice is their ultimate goal and motivating factor. In order to achieve total justice, which involves economic justice, social justice, and political justice, they look for the means by which they may travel to this end. And that is mainly, they look to government coercion. Through government coercion, they can effectuate their justice objective. The utopian left needs coercion, and this is their means on their way to the end of justice. But I'm going to offer a caveat, because on the way to social justice, not everybody is in agreement with the total goal of economic and social justice, which means control, regulation, and I think ultimately the redistribution of individuals' wealth in society. Individuals, when they have something of value, tend to want to keep it for themselves, or trade it away for something of value elsewhere. But this is just the way all of life's entities work. The presence of coercion means the inability to cooperate, and the less cooperation means the less amount of respect between parties. So I'm going to summarize now here a little bit. The utopian leftist has the following ingredients: the starting assumption that other people are bad, the objective of social and economic egalitarian justice, and the need for coercion to effectuate their objective. On the other hand, the right, on the right side of things, and I accept the pun, the conservative Republican starts with the assumption that the other person is good, and consequently cooperation comes easily, and as such respect develops, facilitating cooperation. As respect grows, so does the ethical actions and considerations of others, and we consider others important when we want to cooperate with them in order to produce a good or service, which helps us bring ourselves up away from misery and produce good things for our lives. So on the right, it starts with the assumption that others are good. The objective is individualism, and the method to achieve it is freedom. Now let's put this side by side. The left starts with the assumption that others are bad. The right says they assume that the nature of the other is good. The right starts with that the others are good. The left says that the objective is egalitarian justice. The right says that their objective is individualism. The left says that their method to achieve it is coercion, and the right says their method is freedom. So, and we'll discuss this more in later editions of the Philosophical Angle. But let's get back to the Trump administration and its problems with the media. And let's ask Rick about what he thinks of the slander and traducing of the Trump administration on a daily basis by the media. What do you think, Rick?
Well, there was an interesting article that appeared in the regular publication of Hillsdale College that came out for the day by a certain journalist named Mr. Goodwin, who was originally of the New York Times earlier in his career. Now he's at the New York Post. And he traces the history of what has happened to the media since the legendary editor Abe Rosenthal was there. And what distinct the approach, the editorial approach then under Rosenthal, according to him, was that Rosenthal knew that his reporters were generally liberal, whatever, 80% liberal. And what he would do in selecting articles and editing them is he would deliberately push the content toward the right, thereby achieving as best he could a middle way. In other words, there was a self-awareness amongst the media then, at least the New York Times, that many were leftist or certainly leaned liberal, and therefore, in order to present a balanced and fair representation of what's actually happening, there had to be at least some sort of check, some sort of editorial function that would attempt, at least, to adjust for that. And according to Goodwin, all of the editors since Rosenthal left, this is quite a few years ago now, have abandoned that principle. All right? So there's no editorial function now at the New York Times, and by extension at many of the other newspapers, whether it's the Washington Post or what have you, to serve that role. And in his view, he readily acknowledges that Trump is being slandered on a daily basis with very little evidence to back it up. So there's certainly, if he is correct, perhaps one way to attack this is through something like the Columbia School of Journalism or other organizations. Let's say the Pulitzer Prize, and turn them toward rewarding and recognizing editors out there who at least attempt to implement an editorial function that brings the paper or various sources of media into line with a more balanced approach.
Okay. You think that's possible in the current environment? I don't think so. Because the left, over the last 20 or 30 years, has distinctly moved.
I mean, I agree. But call it aspirational.
Right. So what happens when over the last 30 years the movement of the left is gone further to the left? Is there are there any means by which they could come back at least a little bit away from their progressive?
Well, I think. I mean, there's hope in that the internet has allowed for all kinds of expression in all kinds of forms.
we've lost Rick here. Go ahead.
Some of it ludicrous, but some of it quite useful and informative. And people now are self-selecting what sources they want to read.
Okay.
Current trends show no indication of that. And I would add, even this yesterday's election in Georgia, which was hyped up as by that leftist media as a likely Democratic win, turned out to be effectively a landslide Republican. So it's clear that voters see through this stuff, and will continue to see through this stuff because, you know, the people who reside in quote unquote flyover country are, you know, ever so much smarter than the liberals give them credit for.
Okay. All right, good. Thanks very much, Rick, and we're going to see everybody again on the next week's edition of the Philosophical Angle. Thanks.